The world just witnessed a geopolitical earthquake, Russia arming Yemen with Sukhoi fighter jets. What was once unthinkable has now become reality, shaking the very foundations of Western power. This isn't just an arms deal, it's a declaration of defiance, a signal that the global order is shifting. As the West scrambles to react, one question echoes worldwide. Has the age of Western dominance finally come to an end? The sudden announcement of a Russian-Yemeni defense pact centered on the delivery of Sukhoi fighter jets has sent tremors across the geopolitical landscape. For years, the Middle East has functioned as a chessboard of Western influence, with Washington and its allies dictating who gets to arm whom. Now, Russia has just moved a major piece across that board, and it's a move no one saw coming. The image of Yemeni pilots training in Russian-made jets has already become a symbol of how dramatically the global order is shifting. The deal isn't merely a matter of defense hardware. It's a deliberate signal that Moscow intends to assert itself as a key architect of the new power balance emerging in the region. What makes this development so strategically powerful is its timing. The West's grip on the Middle East has been weakening politically, economically, and militarily, while Russia has been quietly rebuilding relationships with states seeking independence from Western oversight. By arming Yemen, Moscow is not only expanding its reach into the Arabian Peninsula, but also challenging the long-standing monopoly of Western arms suppliers. It's a carefully calibrated message. Russia is no longer content to play on the periphery of global influence. It's now writing its own rules for engagement. The move also reveals the evolving reality that even nations devastated by war, like Yemen, can become central players in the reconfiguration of world power. With the introduction of Sukhoi aircraft, Yemen is poised to strengthen its air defense and deterrence capabilities, a shift that may alter the strategic calculus across the Red Sea and Gulf regions. Western policymakers, accustomed to seeing Yemen as a humanitarian tragedy rather than a sovereign actor, now face a new dilemma. One where Russia's involvement elevates Yemen from a battleground to a bargaining power. And here lies the hook that the headlines miss. This isn't only about weapons, it's about symbolism. Every Sukhoi jet delivered to Yemen carries a message that echoes beyond borders. A declaration that global influence is no longer the private property of the West. It's a reminder that in the 21st century, even nations once sidelined can rise to the center of the world stage when the tides of geopolitics begin to turn. Russia has not just armed Yemen, it has armed the idea that the world can no longer be managed by one side alone. The reaction from Western capitals to Russia's Sukhoi deal with Yemen has been one of alarm, disbelief, and quiet strategic anxiety. Behind closed doors in Washington, London, and Brussels, policymakers are scrambling to interpret what this move truly means, not just for Yemen's defense capabilities, but for the long-term structure of global alliances. The West, long accustomed to controlling the flow of arms in the Middle East, suddenly finds itself confronted by a rival that is rewriting the rules of engagement. Russia's decision to arm Yemen represents more than a military exchange. It's a geopolitical challenge to Western authority, a calculated disruption of a system that has for decades served Western interests above all else. In every major foreign policy circle, the same question now echoes: has Moscow just outflanked the West in one of its most sensitive regions? The unease stems from the fact that this deal exposes deep vulnerabilities in Western strategy. For years, Western powers have relied on selective partnerships, economic aid, and military dependence to maintain control over Middle Eastern states. But by offering Yemen advanced Russian aircraft, Moscow has provided something far more valuable: autonomy. The idea that a nation once dependent on Western approval could now find strength through an Eastern ally unsettles the very foundation of Western diplomacy. The fear isn't just about the presence of Russian fighter jets in the skies over the Arabian Peninsula. It's about what that presence represents, the erosion of Western monopoly over regional influence. Western officials understand that once nations begin diversifying their alliances, the political leverage that comes with military aid starts to fade, and that in turn threatens not only the West's strategic dominance, but also the vast defense and energy markets tied to it. The ripples of this deal extend far beyond Yemen. They strike at the heart of Western geopolitical comfort zones, from NATO's coordination tables to the Pentagon's long-term defense planning. Here's the real hook. The outrage isn't about peace or stability. It's about power slipping away. The West's public condemnation of the deal hides a deeper truth that for the first time in decades, it's reacting rather than dictating. The global order it once designed is now being rewritten by others. And as Russian jets head for Yemeni air bases, the West is forced to watch history shift without its consent. Russia's decision to arm Yemen fits seamlessly into its long-term pursuit of a multipolar world, a world where no single power bloc, particularly the West, dictates the rules of engagement. For decades, the international order has revolved around Western dominance, supported by military alliances, economic systems, and media narratives designed to maintain a unipolar structure. But Moscow has been steadily working to dismantle that arrangement, not through open confrontation alone, but through strategic partnerships that empower nations long marginalized by Western control. The Sukhoi deal with Yemen is a prime example of that vision taking tangible form, a deliberate step toward redistributing power in the global system. The genius of Russia's strategy lies in its subtlety. Rather than challenging Western power directly, it builds strength by elevating others, by offering technology, trade, and military support to states that have been sidelined or sanctioned. This approach transforms nations like Yemen into symbols of resistance against Western-imposed hierarchies. When Russia sells advanced aircraft to Yemen, it isn't just conducting an arms transaction, it's offering a political lifeline, a way for a once embattled nation to assert sovereignty in a system that often denies it. Every Sukhoi jet delivered represents not just air power, but also ideological empowerment, a bold reminder that alternatives to Western dependency now exist. This is the real heart of the multipolar movement, a world of options, not obedience. Russia's outreach to Yemen mirrors its broader relationships with nations like Iran, Syria, and even segments of Africa and Latin America. These alliances are not built on the old colonial model of exploitation, but on shared resistance to Western dominance. By diversifying defense partnerships and economic ties, Moscow is constructing an ecosystem of nations that can sustain each other politically and militarily without relying on Western approval or finance. It's a slow but steady erosion of the old power pyramid that placed the West at its apex. And here's the hook. This isn't just Russia's geopolitical playbook. It's an ideological statement written into policy. The message is clear. The age of Western singularity is ending, replaced by a network of equal, independent actors defining their own interests. The Sukhoi deal with Yemen is more than a contract. It's a declaration that global power can no longer be monopolized. It's the quiet thunder of a new world forming, one where Moscow doesn't seek dominance, but balance. The economic dimensions of Russia's Sukhoi deal with Yemen go far beyond the exchange of aircraft. They strike at the very core of Western economic dominance. For decades, the global arms trade has been one of the most powerful tools of Western influence, tightly bound to the petrodollar system and controlled through exclusive alliances. But Moscow's decision to finalize such a deal with Yemen outside Western frameworks marks a quiet rebellion against that structure. This isn't just about who sells weapons, it's about who defines the rules of global trade, currency use, and financial dependency. Every aspect of this agreement hints at a shifting paradigm, one where nations begin to trade, cooperate, and build defense capabilities without the need for Western intermediaries or approval. What makes this deal particularly significant is its potential to bypass traditional Western-controlled financial systems. Reports suggest that Russia and Yemen are exploring alternative payment structures, possibly through local currencies, barter arrangements, or energy-based exchanges. Such mechanisms directly undermine the dominance of the U.S. dollar, which has long been the backbone of Western economic control. When countries like Yemen begin operating outside this monetary orbit, it sends a powerful signal that sovereignty is not just about military strength, but also about financial independence. Russia, with its growing partnerships across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, is systematically constructing an economic ecosystem designed to weaken Western leverage one deal at a time. From a strategic standpoint, this represents the merging of economics and geopolitics in one bold move. The Sukhoi jets themselves are symbols of technological cooperation, but the payment structure behind them carries even greater meaning. It demonstrates that global trade can evolve beyond the old rules written in Washington and Brussels. It's an act of defiance disguised as diplomacy, wrapped in the language of commerce, but charged with political intent. By doing business differently, Moscow and its partners are quietly eroding the mechanisms that have long allowed Western powers to dictate terms to the rest of the world. Here's the hook. This isn't merely an arms sale. It's an economic revolution in motion. The Sukhoi deal has exposed a crack in the foundation of Western monopoly, and through that crack, a new model of global exchange is emerging. One built not on coercion or currency dominance, but on mutual benefit and strategic independence. For decades, Yemen has been portrayed through a single lens, a country trapped in conflict, burdened by humanitarian crisis, and dependent on foreign aid. But the new defense partnership with Russia marks a profound shift in that narrative. By acquiring Sukhoi fighter jets and establishing a formal military alliance with Moscow, Yemen is stepping out of the shadow of victimhood and into a position of strategic relevance. The deal transforms Yemen from a passive recipient of international intervention into an active player in shaping regional security. It's a declaration that Yemen is no longer content to be defined by its struggles. It now seeks to define its own destiny in the evolving geopolitical order. This transformation carries immense symbolic weight. The arrival of Russian-built aircraft on Yemeni soil represents not just military modernization, but also political rebirth. It signals that even nations devastated by years of war can rise again with the right partnerships and strategic foresight. In regional terms, Yemen's position at the mouth of the Red Sea, one of the world's most vital maritime corridors, gives it leverage that extends far beyond its borders. Control over these waters directly affects global energy trade and shipping routes, and any nation capable of defending that territory holds immense geopolitical power. With Russian support, Yemen now finds itself equipped to assert that control more confidently, altering the strategic balance across the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa. The psychological impact on the region is just as powerful as the military one. For years, Yemen's sovereignty was treated as negotiable, its future decided in foreign capitals. Now, this partnership represents an act of defiance, a message to the world that Yemen will no longer be dictated to, but will instead dictate its own path. The West, accustomed to dealing with a weakened Yemen, suddenly faces a nation more self-assured, more capable, and more aligned with a new global axis of independence led by Moscow. Here's the hook. This isn't just the story of a deal. It's the story of a nation rewriting its place in history. Yemen's alignment with Russia transforms it from a battleground into a power broker. It's a reminder that even in the ashes of conflict, nations can rise, reclaim agency, and reshape the world around them. Yemen, long underestimated, has just entered the global stage with a roar. The Sukhoi deal between Russia and Yemen is more than a bilateral defense transaction. It's a symbolic strike against decades of U.S. hegemony. For the first time in modern history, a country long considered peripheral to global power has become a flashpoint in the unraveling of Western dominance. The West, accustomed to dictating the terms of alliances and defense deals, now finds itself watching as its former playbook is rewritten by its rivals. Russia's deepening military ties with Yemen send a clear message to Washington and its allies: the monopoly on global influence is over, and the age of uncontested American authority is drawing to a close. From a strategic lens, the implications are staggering. For years, U.S. military policy in the Middle East has revolved around maintaining supremacy through arms control, sanctions, and selective alliances. But when Russia steps in and begins supplying advanced fighter jets like the Sukhoi series, it directly challenges that architecture. It's not just an alternative supply line, it's an ideological counteroffer. Moscow is positioning itself as the champion of sovereignty, offering partnerships without political conditions, a stark contrast to the conditional aid packages and military contracts that have long defined Western engagement. This narrative appeals powerfully to nations wary of being treated as extensions of Western interests rather than independent actors. The real shock for the West is not in the aircraft themselves, but in what they represent: a global realignment. Yemen's new defense partnership reflects a broader trend where nations across the global south are diversifying their alliances, embracing a world no longer defined by U.S. leadership. Each new Russian deal, whether in Africa, Asia, or the Middle East, chips away at the unipolar system that emerged after the Cold War. The West's frustration stems from realizing that its influence is no longer self-sustaining. It must now compete in an open marketplace of power, where others, like Russia and China, are equally capable of shaping the global agenda. And here's the hook. What truly unnerves Washington is not the transfer of technology, but the transfer of trust. Nations like Yemen are no longer seeking permission to defend themselves or choose their allies. They're choosing autonomy over alignment, partnership over patronage. The Sukhoi deal, therefore, is more than a contract. It's a mirror reflecting a new truth: that the world no longer waits for America's approval before moving forward.